Hi everyone, welcome to this session. Big pleasure for me to be with you, friends and colleagues and students and professors and all of you who are listening to this session. It's a big pleasure to talk now about an experience that it is quite rare on when we use students' engagement, when it is unplanned, and how we can integrate that into existing curriculums, if at all. But before I talk about the experience and what we have gone through in this research, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Edlira Gjoni, Professor of Communications at Tirana University, Master's Studies on Communication for Social Change at the Department of Social Work. And with this department, I have also conducted this research. I'm an active participant in service learning, and I did integrate the impact and outcome of the service learning on the student assessment at the end of this year. So I'm going to talk about an action-based research with 25 students and 256 community members that were affected by the earthquake that hit Albania last year. And I'm going to talk about the benefits of this unplanned community engagement, as well as the struggles that we faced against educational design and how we could fit this into the final examination of students. We're gonna see a little bit how we can act and learn in natural disaster, and we can learn from this from students actually, and we're going to look at the benefits of integrating these unplanned engagement into the existing courses. You're going to see how community and student engagement are beneficial from both sides, and in this instance, I did look at the students' practical skills in real life situation to be very much enhanced, and also the community benefited from the free services and support that they received from students. This was a very encouraging practice, to be honest, and I did learn how we can act on unplanned scenarios, and also with my colleagues I shared the lessons on how we can learn from these ad hoc interventions at an academic level. What does it mean? It means that once this impact on the services was visible, and also on the students as well, then how could we adapt, or first of all link these outcomes to learning assessments, and then how we can adapt this to the existing curriculum. So these are new opportunities of service learning that do impact the students and the communities, and also enhance the reputation of the university. But I would like to start by just touching a little bit on the service learning and the students' engagement discussion, whether this is a new phenomenon in Albania. Well, it is not. It has been known in other terms in many decades, known as name voluntarism, or maybe community services and internships, and many other names like all over the world. So it has existed before in planned activities, whilst there is no unplanned engagements for cases of natural disasters like it happened in the case in study brought here. Now, what is student engagement? It has also changed the meaning, just same as the service learning. It has changed from volunteer to internship to engaging initiatives, etc. And now students do not just simply go to do work-based learning, but have moved to problems-based learning, and lately, like the case in this presentation, an action-based research. So the students have now moved into the entire spectrum from service to learning, and also vice versa. Now, what has been researched, we are familiar with the literature, very much connected and in-depth research, the impact on students, and also the implications for education institutions. Less research has been done on the impact that the students' work has on the community, because the type of student engagement has been such that could not really be measured the impact on the community. But in this case, the impact on the community is the one that comes on top, and it was easier to measure. Hence, I'm going to look at the benefits of this impact and how we can embrace it, even if it is unplanned. Why should we embrace it? Because we want to become a more engaged university, and this is the theme of this conference as well. So in this sense, it would be nice for us to look at the strong links with the communities, and already universities have moved away from only academic engagements, and the mission now is to go beyond teaching and to be a service provider, to be more action-oriented, and also to prepare transforming citizens, or as we call them in our curriculum, agents of change. Now, to do that, universities have to be a little bit more open, and they have to be able and ready to embrace and reflect on opportunities like the one that I'm going to explain in the case study. But are universities ready to embrace those opportunities? And what is wrong with considering unplanned engagements on the third month of a year, academic year, like it happened in this case? Well, reflections are very slow because for the same reasons that we plan or not. First of all, there is difficulty to match academic goals with community needs. This is the biggest problem always when it comes to community engagement, matching the goals. Second is to measure the impact. Okay, it might be in one side, what about the other? There's a mismatch in timing and planning, difficult to supervise the students. And finally, there are uncertainties on how community needs fit or not with the student assessment. And even if this happens, how can this be measured, and can it be integrated into existing courses? This was my biggest question, and around that I designed a methodology that was incited whilst evaluating this engagement of the students, of my students, during their action-based process and observing their work, which led me to ask these usual questions that we would all ask. Suddenly, a student engagement that was unplanned was working well. Why? Second, how could this be translated into credits? And third, can this go further and be institutionalized? So, but to do this, I needed definitely a baseline data, and this is why I did an online survey in January this year, screening all community engagement activities of higher education institutions in my country, and I selected 2 samples for further research, examining the scope and scale of the engagement as 2 main criteria for selections. Then the central study was followed by semi-structured interviews and participatory observation techniques on the side to map the role, relationship, and effects on students so that I could use those in the final assessment. Once I had the data, it was then easier for me to use the inductive approach of the features of students, to interrogate the open-ended questions, and also to use open coding and annotation on the surveys and the manuscripts. Interesting findings. First of all, out of the 16 institutions that I have asked to respond to the questions on whether they do have planned activities and student engagements in their curricula, 11 responded, and their engagement in terms of crisis were only voluntary, and in terms of donating goods, unplanned. The planned official curriculum came only in form of projects, internship, and volunteer work. There was no dedicated modules for service learning, neither optional nor required core subjects. And the closest form of engagement was exactly the project work and the internship period. Hence, it was for me difficult to conclude, although universities did say that their students were engaged during the earthquake, it is difficult to conclude whether it was community engagement, because learning experience after the earthquake was not translating into learning outcome. So what I did when I finished this research, I shared my results with them and asked them whether we could together, the higher education institution, come together and reflect on the curriculum. There were no answers from my colleagues in March, but the good news is a series of meetings has started in June, so we are moving forward. So let's talk about the case study. It is a student engagement project that started immediately after the earthquake in Albania. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. The student entitled this project Responding to Post-Earthquake Needs in Durrës, their own initiative, which incited my survey and my research. It had all the required scope and scale for full research from my side. And the project was carried out by 25 students and 3 teachers, including myself, working at Tirana University between December last year and 6th of March this year. And this was the last day, not just by coincidence, but it was the day that Albania entered into lockdown. So this was the scenario, and this is how it started. Project was implemented by students, research is done by myself. So this project had all the elements of a service learning approach, from student engagement and their multiple roles, which I have observed and identified, to being active participants and having an impact in the community, and also to reflect and to be really big actors in institutionalizing at university level their work. How did this start? It started with the earthquake on 26th of November last year, the deadliest of the year, as it was called, with 51 victims and so many people injured afterwards, with a state of emergency and many aftershocks that shook our life. Emergency tents were everywhere in central Albania. Rescue operations were ongoing, and to this day, about 5,200 families remain without any shelter. So in this situation, media and journalists were traveling, and celebrities as well from the world were traveling from one town to the other, or from villages that were next to the road to the other, and some donating, some doing shows. But these were not the only areas that were affected by the earthquake. There were also some hidden and unreachable villages where media would not arrive, would not go, but one of my students had gone previously to hike, and so he suggested when the earthquake hit that they, as a group, they would go there. So the group did follow, and what they came across was destroyed and unsafe homes and no help available, no connections and no services in this place where nobody would go and no one else would do anything. So the students did go, and parallel to the services, I made sure that they also did some learning tasks. And I did ask them to diagnose immediate needs, to prioritize, and to design an intervention plan. Now, my task was only to guide them and to make sure that, since they were spending so much time at the site, not only to serve, but also to learn. That was my only role, and I ended there. Then students took over, and conceptually, they were the facilitators between the community and the third parties, and also they brought the support of families and other donors, gave voice to locals, and also provided social, psychological, and even entertainment services. It was really challenging, even from the geographical point of view, and nevertheless, the students did harmonize this set of proposal, the database and the demographic content of the area, and this was used by donors and also other government agencies who actually arrived at the site just because the students were there, and they made an excellent work with the media. So what did I observe because of all this situation? And first of all, I observed, using the curricular terms for student community engagement, I saw students acting as facilitators, community participants, and agents of change, whilst community members saw them as experts, sometimes even as doctors or lawyers. This is how good the students were working as enablers, NGO workers, or contact points, while students saw themselves as participants, supporters, learners in the crisis. Now, if you see the actions that they had to complete during this time, that was guided by me as the person who would evaluate finally the learning outcome, they went into tasks that can definitely be assessed in the learning. The place was always the placement side, and the learning outputs were very well designed in concrete materials. The impact was that the 15 hours a week for 11 weeks was motivated by the students' desire to stay there from the humor perspective, not only because they had to finish a project work. The impact on the community was also very impressive, and I wish this was a project that was paid by someone, but it was complete volunteer work from the side of the students and also from our side. And nevertheless, as you can see, new containers, new tents, social work services, edutainment classes for kids, set up, houses assessed earlier than any other area. All this was enabled because the students were there and they wanted to finish this project. And I have also identified some improvements in their learning, and they became more cooperative and they became better at fast analysis, the elements of effective leadership and the planning, the responsibilities. They became better people. Was this easy? Absolutely not. It had implications because students had to work on a dangerous location, unstable it was classified, and nevertheless, and their roles were overlapping and changeable, but they stayed. They stayed and they became more interested in the world around them. They now have a better track record in attendance and performance, and 4 of them have become more active in civic life and in the media. Of course, they were not alone in all this endeavor. There were community members helping them, authorities, university staff, relatives, government agencies. They all joined after the students. The first steps were theirs, and they were definitely in the lead of the whole process. Now, students also themselves identified some changes at the recipient community in the end, and this was the trust. Very difficult in the beginning, but then the trust started to build up because of the work of these students. So can these activities be connected with the learning outcome? Absolutely. Together with my colleagues from university, we sat and discussed, and we said that there is definitely possible to link the curricular content, the learning and the servicing. And this is a table that I used for the final evaluation of the course. We definitely had some emerging themes as it happens when you discuss with your colleagues, and usually is even when it is planned, there's always time scale and outcomes that are mismatched between the syllabus and serving learning requirements. And when it is not planned, timing, planning, and safety are the main emerging themes and problems that came from the in-depth interviews with the teachers. And university and our bosses and the higher hierarchical universities, they said that they would embrace future unplanned activities if it happens that it is only one project within one locality longer than 1 year, where multiple cohorts can participate, and it has to be a little bit closer to university than the earthquake site. Reflections were norm during the work. On the almost 3 months of the work, they were organized bi-weekly, and we looked at the practical experience and how we could link it to the learning objectives. That was the main thing that we used to reflect time and again, and this is why it was not difficult for us to discuss about transforming impact into the learning outcome in the end. It was all free on a voluntary basis, driven by sentiments of sorrow in a natural disaster. And in conclusion, I would like to say that our students, we have to believe in them more. We have to follow them actually, because they can perform, plan, learn, and leave an impact even in unplanned scenarios, and we have to adapt to their pace. And it had a threefold impact and really benefits all this experience. First of all, it improved students' performance and civic participation. Second, it enhanced the university reputation. And third, it had a positive impact in the community. And that's why they say thank you, and thank you for listening to me. Bye.